it was sent up as a try.
Yeah, but Mark, it's very, it's not like sometimes you get video referees that are kind of unclear because it might have been a knock on, like the first thing they checked.
Well, that to me, that was the bit that was as much in doubt as any of it. I thought Percival knocked on, but other people have said he didn't, including Darryl Powell, actually, who, to be fair to Darryl Powell, normally is one to go after the match officials.
Yeah.
In moments like that, but he didn't do here. But so I thought it was a Percival knock on. I thought the rest of it after that was a moot point, but it was given us being level. And then the in touch, not in touch thing. I mean, other match officials, former referee Ian Smith came out and said, no, it's when the last foot leaves that's relevant, which the rule doesn't really describe when does a jump become a jump, does it?
Yeah, that's the bit I was so unsure about.
Well, because Noble expressed it quite well in the fact that you don't jump from one leg.
Yeah,
he gained forward momentum with his foot that was out of play, then pressed off on the foot that was in play and pushed it back inside. As far as I'm concerned, the rule is very clear. It's incredibly clear in terms of, you have to have both feet in play, and if one foot has gone out of play, it needs to be back in play, as in on the ground, before you can make a move to catch the ball or tap it back or whatever. So to me, it's a stone cold no try. And I was, when I was watching it, as I said, first time I saw it, I saw his foot was out, and I said, "That's out. He's out of play. He didn't get back in the field of play. No try." And that was on one viewing. I didn't need to look at the Percival potential knock on. I didn't need to look at anything else. His foot was clearly out of play. He touched the ball. The ball's dead. Simple as that.
I suppose to me, as long as if that application of that ruling, because it doesn't specifically state, does it, that it has to be both feet in the field of play or how it needs to be, or the last foot in the field of play makes it okay, or however, it doesn't specifically say it. So as long as they all understand, the match officials and the players and stuff all understand that that's consistently the way that that's ruled, then I'm kind of okay with it, even though I thought it the same as what you sort of point of view you were coming from, Alan. I'm sort of okay with it if everyone's aware of it, but I don't think it's ever happened. But I've never seen it happen or been debated before or anything. So
because usually the player will have possession when he steps out.
Yes.
So therefore it's a very clear. And we have this thing when people are coming back from the. Sometimes you've seen it when the ball's kind of deep in the in goal and players are behind the dead ball line. They have to be back in the field of play before they touch it. If they touch the ball where they're out of play, they're out. And we've definitely seen that applied in try decisions. Mm-hmm. So I kind of, for me, it was clear from the first replay, and it did feel like they were trying to give it. And to me, the on-field call was, it was a hypothesis based on what he'd seen from 20 yards away. The touch judge obviously wasn't certain because he didn't advise one way or the other. So
I think it was the touch judge who determined that it needed to go to the video referee, wasn't it, ultimately? It seemed like to me.
For me, if I'm in one camp, it's clearly no try camp, I'm afraid. It was just, for me, the rule is perhaps slightly ambiguous, but I think you're stretching the rule to try to say that you can have one foot out of play, jump into the field of play, and then touch the ball, because you can't do that if you're kicking for touch. You can't do that in all kinds of other circumstances.
So I think one way or another as a group, on average, overall, we've come down on the side that it probably shouldn't have been given. I think for the knock-on, you think for the in-touch, and James doesn't want to admit that he thinks it was no try, but he thinks it was no try.
I did think it was no try, and to be honest, I didn't know what the rule was completely. I don't think anyone in the crowd did, and I don't know if it is a little bit ambiguous. I think so. I think they will probably try to clarify that.
It's not written specifically to try to rule that circumstance out. It's just trying to determine when somebody's in play or when somebody's out of play. And that thing about you're in play if both feet are in play, both feet are in play, if you like.
Well, in the NFL, they have the rule is that a player has to establish himself back in the field of play before he can pick up a ball, and establishing himself back in the field of play is defined as having both feet back in the field of play. So
if it was written like that,
but then I think they still can't be the first person to touch the ball in the NFL. So it's even more things to dig into in their rule book. But the try was given. In a way, that try being given at that point kind of will always make this linger as a doubt for Cas fans, won't it? This game, when I actually think from that, not necessarily from that point on. I think even if that was a no try, I do think Saints had reset at half time. And the next try, there was, nothing ambiguous, nothing controversial about it. It was, I don't know if it was by luck or masterstroke that the ultimate utility back, Jack Welsby, got put into the halves when Farge had a bit of a shoulder problem, was it? So, and Welsby ran the show a little bit in that sort of first 10, 15 minutes of the second half. Coop performed well as well, but it was Welsby who set up the situation for Tommy Makinson's try.
It was King Jack, as we call him now in St Helens, Mark, was superb at the start of that second half. And I think he was on the bench, and whether he was going to come on at some point, whether that was to
he'd come on in the forwards at the back end of the first half, hadn't he?
Yeah, kind of loose forward spelling Knowles, I think was the original design, but I think he was always there as well in case Farge couldn't quite make it through. And to be honest, Farge was awful in the first half. After he scored, he was very poor. So we were quite happy to see Welsby on for that second half, and he was guiding us around the park, him and Roby together in that first 15 minutes excellently. And for the try itself, I mean, we were all from where, because we were obviously behind the Saints at that point. We were all shouting for us to go to the right hand side because we could see there was an overlap from the play to ball, and then they went left and kind of, I think it was Coot who originally reversed field, found Welsby, and then we eventually managed to hit the overlap with Nakama finding Makinson for the try in the corner. So I thought we'd blown it by going to the left, and that Castleford reorganised themselves, but they didn't manage to. And he did really well to crab across the field long enough, but not too long, to make sure that we had that kind of overlap on the right hand side. It was perfect timing with the pass out to Nakama. And I think once we scored that, there was an absolute surge in confidence in both the fans in the ground and in the team. It felt like we were back where we were after we scored the first try of the game.
You didn't have to chase the game then, did you? So you could do all of the things that St Helens under Wolf have done really well, which is sort of a controlled defensive line, a low error rate, and I think that was on evidence throughout the second half. But in particular, I think defensively, at that stage after that, when Cass did get some field position a couple of times, with Evels being a constant threat of looking like he had an extra gear of speed to anyone else on the pitch, but Saints were then had got themselves more organised, were understanding the threats better, and the pitch, the massive wide Wembley pitch wasn't wide enough for Castleford to find a way around St Helens quite a few times, and I think by the hour mark, Cass, I don't know if this felt the same to you guys in the stadium, but by the hour mark, I started to feel like Cass had run out of ideas and hadn't readjusted as well to St Helens adjusting their defence and their organisation. And there was several occasions where Cass were out wide and couldn't break Saints down. I don't know if you built confidence from that, James.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the second half, I never felt like we were under great threat. You're right, Evans was still playing really well, and they did have some ball in our half, but actually it was Castleford who were making more of the mistakes and dropping the ball more. And it never felt like we were scrambling or, going backwards at the same pace that we were in that first half when Castleford were on top. It felt like we were organised and ready for what they were going to throw at us in that second half. So, I don't ever remember feeling after that Makinson try like we were under real threat from Castleford. And I think they did kind of blow themselves out by 60. And actually, as much as there was the what's the right word? Time wasting tactics or slowing the game down tactics by Saints that we've seen more recently under Wolf. There were Castleford players down with cramp in that second half, slowing themselves up at points as well, where I think they'd kind of ran themselves out of steam a little bit.
Well, there was a couple of really stupid penalties from Cass as well, weren't there? The Matautia blocking off Percival when even Percival wasn't going to get to that kick, and he clearly walked across his path. So the ref kind of didn't have a huge amount of options. He could have thought, well, he wasn't going to get there anyway, and it's a cup final, I'll swallow my whistle. But that was a clear and obvious penalty, wasn't it? And then the second penalty goal, just a few minutes after that one, where I think at least 2/3 of the Cass defensive line were only 3 or 4 meters away from the play of the ball and 3 or 4 meters offside, and that was through desperation and hanging on and kind of them losing their heads a little bit. I felt, Al, did you feel a sense of that by that stage, by the sort of 65th, 70th minute?
I just felt that their fatigue levels were too high. Like, I think we mentioned it, like you said, they were struggling to break Saints down. They certainly, their structured plays were not working because maybe the kind of middles weren't doing quite enough to commit people in the middle, and the defense was just crabbing across. And number of times the winger would get it and he'd be kind of enveloped by 3 or 4 Saints players. I must have counted like 3 or 4 times that happened. For me, they were still a threat when they were, just chucking the ball around. I mean, there was the one that I remember where Evans was so close to getting away from Lomax.
Yeah.
And it was just like a real desperation tackle. So maybe James has blotted that one out. But that was definitely a
I think Evans became the only threat, didn't he? Whereas in the first half, Matauti was playing well. Truman had a couple of moments. I think even in the fourth, Jesse Selinafeo was strong in the first half, but had to go off in the second half. He was just too gassed. I think he hadn't had enough game time or what have you.
The Cass players were, as you said, were gassed, and whether it was tactic or whether it was happenstance, bringing somebody like Wellesby on in those kind of circumstances, that's just perfect tactics. Because as you say, Cass's middle were well fatigued. He's exactly the kind of player you want who can kind of expose those kind of gaps.
Whilst Darryl Powell seemed to accept the Roby try and sort of put some of that on his defence not scrambling well enough, he did mention that he felt like the scoreline he didn't quite say flattered Saints, I don't think, but he said it was a bit harsh on his side, the eventual margin, and I suppose that brings us to the last controversial moment and the last talking point of the actual match that I can think of, and that's the Kyle Amor try. Now, lots of people, and I'm sure we'll talk about this when we do the other fan reviews, Al, will say how can it be giving us a try when no one saw the ball getting grounded? So there's been a guess there, hasn't there, by the on-field referee, and as we've already talked about, the live call is huge. How, when they can't see anything, can the video referee overrule what the on-field referee has sent it up as? It was scored towards the Cass end, wasn't it, that try? So maybe you had a better view than James did of the Kyle Amor try. So what did you make of it?
To be fair, all I saw was a massive bodies, which is all the referee and video referee saw. It was just a massive human flesh, and you couldn't see the ball. You definitely couldn't see it on the floor. So at no point do I think the referee saw that it was clearly a try. obviously he had potential to get it down, of course, because he's a big chap and, you know, he wanted to get that cup final try. But